The day my son died, the world around me became unrecognizable. There are no words strong enough to describe what it feels like to lose a child your own flesh and blood, a piece of your heart you carried, nurtured, and watched grow. It was as if my chest had been cracked open and all the air, the light, and the meaning of life had been stolen from me in an instant. I woke up one morning as a mother, and by nightfall, I was left with a silence so heavy it threatened to crush me. My son, Daniel, was only 12 years old. He wasn't just my child. He was my anchor. He had this laugh, bright, bubbling, and always just a little louder than necessary, that could fill a room with warmth. His presence was a light in our family, even for those who didn't always see him for who he was. Daniel had been sick for a while, but he fought with such courage that I sometimes forgot he was fighting at all. He never wanted pity. He just wanted to be treated like the curious, adventurous boy he was. The day he passed, I sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of sleep. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale, but his grip weak as it was still felt like he was reassuring me. He looked at me once, his eyes hazy but determined, and whispered, "It's okay, Mom." Those were his last words. In the moment his chest stilled and the monitors went flat, I felt my own soul leave my body. Everything after that was a blur. The doctors and nurses tried to offer comfort, but their words floated past me like smoke. I signed paperwork with trembling hands, barely comprehending what I was agreeing to. Walking out of the hospital without him was like walking off a cliff and free falling into a pit of darkness. I expected, hoped that my family would be the rope to pull me back up. My parents, my siblings, my relatives, I thought they would rally around me, surround me with the love and support I desperately needed. Because when tragedy strikes, isn't that what family is supposed to do? Instead, when I called them with the news, I was met with awkward silences and half-hearted condolences. My mother sighed heavily and said, "It's such a shame, dear. But at least he's at peace now." My father muttered something about how hard this must be for me, then quickly changed the subject to how exhausted they were with the upcoming engagement party preparations for my sister. Emily herself sounded distracted when I told her. She said she was sorry for my loss, but immediately followed it up with, "Mom and Dad already booked a hall for my engagement dinner. You know how important this is for me? Maybe we can figure out the funeral date so it doesn't overlap." Her words cut deeper than a knife. My son was gone, and all she cared about was whether his funeral would inconvenience her big night in those first hours of grief. I still tried to tell myself it was shock, that maybe they didn't know what to say or how to comfort me. I convinced myself they'd show up, that they'd hold me when I broke down, that they'd stand by me at Daniel's funeral. I needed to believe that, because otherwise I'd have to face the unbearable truth that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally couldn't even be there for the most devastating moment of my life. I sat in Daniel's empty bedroom that night, staring at his untouched toys, the drawings he had pinned to the wall, and the bed that still held the shape of his small body. The silence in the room was suffocating. That's when I realized I wasn't just grieving the loss of my son. I was already beginning to grieve the loss of my family too. The days after Daniel's passing felt like walking through thick fog. I barely ate, I barely slept, and every minute seemed to stretch into an eternity. But even in my grief, I knew one thing with certainty. My son deserved a proper farewell. He deserved a funeral where those who loved him could honor his short but beautiful life. Not a rushed goodbye whispered in the corner of a hospital room I called the funeral home, arranged for a simple service, and picked out a small casket that felt far too cruelly sized for a child. I chose flowers, white lilac, his favorite because he said they smelled clean like fresh rain. Each decision felt like tearing myself apart piece by piece, but I forced myself to keep going. That's what mothers do, I thought. We keep going for our children, even when they're no longer here, but as I tried to plan, the one thing I kept running into was silence from my family. I expected them to call, to offer, to help, to sit with me through the endless tasks of planning. Instead, I had to chase after them, dialing their numbers again and again until they finally answered. When I told my parents the funeral date, I had chosen a Saturday. 4 days after his passing, my mother gasped, not in grief but in annoyance. "Sweetheart, that's the same day as Emily's engagement party," she said. As though I had made some social blunder, I froze, gripping the phone tighter. "Mom, I didn't choose the day. The funeral home had limited slots and we can't wait weeks. He's my child. He deserves this." She sighed, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. "I understand you're grieving, but Emily's engagement was planned months ago. People have already booked flights, paid deposits, everything. It wouldn't be fair to cancel." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. "Are you saying you won't come to your grandson's funeral?" There was a pause, then my father's voice came on the line. "It's not that we don't care, but life must go on. We can't put everything on hold for Lisa. We'll say a prayer for him at the party." I felt the air leave my lungs. A prayer at a party in place of his funeral? My son wasn't an afterthought. He wasn't an interruption in Emily's plans. When I called Emily herself, hoping she would have more compassion, she was even colder. "I'm sorry, sis, but this is the happiest moment of my life. I've waited so long for this. Everyone's coming to celebrate me and James. If you make people choose between my party and your funeral service, most will choose mine. Do you really want to make it awkward?" Her words sliced through me. Awkward? Was my son's death just an inconvenience in her fairy tale timeline? I tried to plead. I told them the pain I was in, that I needed them with me to carry this unbearable weight. But every time I was met with excuses. My parents reminded me of deposits they couldn't lose. Emily reminded me of her gown, her guests, her reputation. Not once did they mention Daniel. Not once did they say his name with love. The morning of the funeral arrived, and as I stood by my son's casket, I looked around the small chapel. The pews were nearly empty. A few close friends were there, and a handful of Daniel's teachers. But my family, the people who should have been my backbone, were nowhere to be seen. Instead, as the priest spoke about my son's gentle spirit, my phone buzzed in my purse. Against my better judgment, I looked. A notification lit up the screen. Pictures from Emily's engagement party. My parents smiling proudly beside her, glasses raised in toast. The caption reading, "Celebrating love and new beginnings." Meanwhile, I was saying goodbye to the little boy who would never see another birthday. Never laugh again. Never get the chance to fall in love. That was the moment my grief began to harden into something else, something sharper, colder. Betrayal had entered the room, and it sat beside me like an unwelcome guest. After the funeral ended, and the few friends who had come quietly slipped away, the silence swallowed me whole. I stood in that empty chapel staring at the flowers, the closed casket, and the small photo of my boy smiling in his favorite blue sweater. I felt like I was the only person left on earth who remembered him, who carried his memory in my chest like a burning coal that would never cool. When I returned home, the loneliness hit me harder than ever. The house was unbearably still, yet somehow every corner echoed with Daniel's presence. His school bag still lay by the door, his sneakers kicked off in their usual messy fashion. His favorite blanket was draped across the couch, and on the kitchen table was the half-finished Lego set he had been working on. Everything was exactly as he left it, but he wasn't coming back to finish any of it. I thought maybe my phone would light up with calls or messages, family checking in, asking how I was holding up, offering to bring food or company. Instead, my phone stayed cold and silent. The only notifications I received were social media updates from the engagement party. My sister Emily beaming in her gown, holding her fiancé's hand. My parents smiling like they hadn't a care in the world. Caption after caption, such a beautiful night. A new chapter begins. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall and shatter it, as if that would silence the proof of how easily my son's life had been overshadowed. How could they be celebrating while I was burying him? How could my parents choose champagne and laughter over their grandson's final goodbye? The days that followed were worse. Grief is heavy enough on its own, but grief in isolation feels like drowning with no one noticing you're underwater. I had to drag myself out of bed each morning, the weight of reality pressing down harder with each sunrise. I'd walk into Daniel's room just to sit on his bed and hold his pillow, inhaling the faint scent of his shampoo, pretending for a moment that he might run in and snatch it back, laughing, but no one came to sit with me. No one came to hold me when the tears racked my body so violently that I could barely breathe. My family didn't even call. Days passed, and their silence spoke louder than words ever could. At night, when the loneliness was unbearable, I scrolled through the endless stream of party photos online. My relatives were there too, cousins I hadn't seen in months, all dressed up, smiling, clinking glasses, celebrating. They hadn't shown up for Daniel, but they had shown up for Emily, and with every photo I saw, I realized more and more that I was alone in this grief. I began to doubt myself. Was I asking too much? Was I selfish to expect them to choose a funeral over a party? Maybe, I thought, I was being dramatic. Maybe no one understood just how much my boy meant. Because no one else carried him the way I did, but then I would see his drawings taped on the fridge. The ones he proudly signed with a shaky scrawl. Danny, age 11. I'd see his handwriting in his school notebooks, his jokes scribbled in the margins. I'd hear his voice in my memory calling, "Mom, come look," when he finished a Lego tower or beat a video game level. No, I wasn't asking too much. He deserved to be remembered. The crushing part wasn't just losing Daniel, it was realizing that my family didn't feel the same urgency to honor him. They moved on in a blink, like his life was just a page in their story they could skip over. And every time I thought about that, my grief twisted into something darker. That isolation became the soil in which resentment began to grow. By the time the first week without Daniel ended, I knew the fracture between me and my family wasn't just temporary. It was the beginning of something permanent, something I wasn't sure could ever be mended. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Daniel's funeral when my parents finally came to my house. Not to console me, not to sit with me in my grief, but with another purpose, one that I never could have imagined, even in my worst nightmares. I opened the door to find them standing there, dressed neatly as if they were on their way to church or a dinner party. My mother held a basket of fruit, the kind you give someone out of politeness rather than love. My father wore that strained, uncomfortable expression he always did when emotions were involved. I let them in, though my chest tightened with resentment. They sat in my living room, looking around at Daniel's toys and drawings still scattered about. My mother wrinkled her nose slightly, like the sight of his untouched things made her uneasy. She placed the fruit basket on the table and cleared her throat. "We wanted to come by and check on you," she said. But her voice lacked warmth. It was the kind of thing you say because you feel obligated, not because you mean it. For a brief moment, hope flickered in me. Maybe, just maybe, they had finally realized how much they had hurt me. Maybe they had come to apologize, to acknowledge the cruelty of skipping his funeral. I sat there, waiting for words of comfort. Instead, my father spoke first. "We've been talking, your mother and I, about Daniel's trust fund." The air in the room shifted. I blinked at him, stunned. "What about it?" "You know," he continued, "it's quite a large sum. $850,000, if I'm not mistaken. That's a lot of money just sitting there." I felt my stomach twist. "It's not just sitting there. That was for Daniel. For his future." My mother reached out, placing her hand on mine as if to soften the blow. "Sweetheart, I know you're grieving, but Daniel's gone. He doesn't need that money anymore. And, well, Emily could really use some help right now. Weddings are expensive. She and James want to start their life together without debt. We thought," I pulled my hand back, trembling with disbelief. "You thought I'd give my dead son's money to Emily? For her wedding?" My mother looked wounded, as if I were being unreasonable. "It wouldn't be for just the wedding. Think of it as supporting family. Emily is starting a new chapter. It would be such a beautiful way to turn something tragic into something hopeful." I could hardly breathe. My son's death was not an opportunity to fund my sister's fairy tale. His life, his savings, his legacy, it was not theirs to claim. My father chimed in again, his tone stern. "We're not asking you to give it all. But you don't need to keep all of it. You live modestly, you don't have big expenses. Why cling to money that could help others?" I stared at them, my grief boiling into fury. "I'm not clinging to money. I'm clinging to my son. That trust was his. Every dollar represents the life he should have had, the college he'll never attend, the dreams he'll never chase. And you want me to hand it over for a party and a honeymoon? My mother's face hardened. You're letting grief make you selfish. Emily's wedding is about family. Don't you think Daniel would have wanted her to be happy? That was it. That was the breaking point. My voice shook, but it came out louder than I intended. Don't you dare speak for my son? Don't you dare use his name to justify your greed? The room went silent. My parents exchanged a look, their expressions shifting from persuasion to disapproval. My father stood, adjusting his jacket. We're only trying to help you move forward. But if you want to sit in misery, that's your choice. They left soon after, the untouched fruit basket sitting like a mockery on my coffee table. I stared at it until my vision blurred with tears. It wasn't just that they had skipped Daniel's funeral. It wasn't just that they had chosen Emily's happiness over his memory. It was that they had come into my broken home, looked at the ashes of my son's life, and asked me to trade them for champagne toasts and flower arrangements. In that moment, I knew I had lost not only my child, but also the family I was born into. After my parents left, I sat on the couch in stunned silence, replaying every word of their visit. My grief had already hollowed me out, but now it was as if they had taken a shovel and tried to dig even deeper into my chest. I couldn't comprehend how people who were supposed to love me could stand in the ruins of my world and talk about flower arrangements and wedding debt, but the storm wasn't over. A few days later, my sister Emily showed up. She didn't knock softly or hesitate at the door. She barged in like she had every right, her engagement ring catching the light as she waved her hand dramatically while talking on the phone. She ended the call quickly, but her smile didn't fade. "Mom and Dad told me you were being difficult," she said, tossing her bag onto a chair. "So I came to clear things up?" I clenched my jaw. Already bracing for whatever speech she had rehearsed, she sat across from me, crossing her legs, her voice dripping with that condescending sweetness she used whenever she wanted something. "Listen, I know you're hurting. I really do. But Daniel's gone. Holding on to that money isn't going to bring him back. It could do so much good for the rest of us." I stared at her. "The rest of us? Or just you?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't make it sound selfish. This is about family. James and I are starting our lives together. That trust fund could set us up, help us buy a house, pay for the wedding, even secure our future kids' education. Isn't that what Daniel would want? For his cousins to benefit?" Her words twisted in my ears like poison. My son's money wasn't a prize for her to snatch up. It wasn't a community chest to hand out to whoever needed it most. It was his. It belonged to the boy who would never get to grow up, never get to fall in love, never get to have children of his own. I felt heat rising in my chest. Daniel doesn't get to have a future. That money is the only piece of his future that still exists. And you want to waste it on a party and a mortgage? Do you hear yourself, Emily? She leaned forward, her voice sharpening. You're being dramatic. People die every day. You can't just sit in this house forever, clutching onto something that doesn't even matter anymore. You need to move on. I snapped. Move on? You skipped his funeral. You posted pictures of yourself in a white dress while I buried my child. And now you want to rob him of the little he has left. Do you have any idea how disgusting that is? Emily's face hardened. You're the disgusting one. Do you know what everyone in the family is saying? That you've let grief make you bitter, that you'd rather wallow in misery than let something good come from this tragedy. Mom and Dad think you've lost perspective, and honestly, I agree. Her words hit me like a slap. Not because they were true, but because I realized how far gone she was, how far gone all of them were. My family wasn't just neglectful. They weren't clueless. They were cruel. They saw my pain as an inconvenience, my son's death as a financial opportunity. I stood, my hands shaking but my voice steady. Get out. Emily blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out. This house was Daniel's home, and I won't let you drag his memory through the mud. If you can't respect him or me, then you don't belong here. She stood slowly, glaring. You'll regret this. When you're alone, when you've pushed everyone away, you'll realize money doesn't keep you warm at night. Family does. I walked to the door and opened it wide. No, real family does. And clearly, I don't have any of that left. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air like smoke after a fire. For the first time since Daniel's death, I didn't collapse into tears. I didn't fall to the floor in grief. Instead, I felt a strange calm, the kind that comes when a wound is cauterized, burned shut to stop the bleeding. I had lost my son. But that day I realized I no longer had a family either. And maybe, just maybe, that was for the best. After Emily left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, the house was silent again. But for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't crush me. It wasn't suffocating, it was peaceful. I sat in Daniel's room that evening, holding one of his stuffed animals, running my fingers over the worn fabric. I thought about everything my family had said to me in the past 2 weeks, their excuses, their cruelty, their audacity to demand that I give away what was left of my son. And in that quiet moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them steal any more from me. Daniel's death had already taken everything that mattered. But his memory? His legacy? That was still mine to protect. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Together, we set things in motion to ensure that not a single penny of Daniel's trust fund would ever end up in the hands of my parents, Emily, or anyone else who had treated him like an afterthought. I moved part of the money into a scholarship fund in his name for children who, like him, had dreams bigger than their circumstances. I wanted other kids to have the chance at a future he had been denied. The rest I kept carefully saved. Not because I wanted it for myself, but because it was Daniel's, and I knew that one day I'd find other ways to honor him, whether it was supporting children's hospitals, funding programs he would have loved, or simply keeping it as a safety net so I could continue living in a way that carried his memory forward. When I told my parents and Emily about my decision, the reaction was immediate and vicious. My mother called me in tears, accusing me of tearing the family apart. My father's voice was icy as he told me I was ungrateful after everything they had supposedly done for me. And Emily? She unleashed a barrage of insults, calling me bitter, selfish, cruel, saying that I had ruined her wedding by refusing to help. For the first time in my life, I didn't care. Their words bounced off me like stones thrown at a wall. Because deep down, I finally understood something. Love isn't proven by blood, but by actions. And my family's actions had shown me the truth. They didn't love me, not really. They didn't love Daniel either. They loved what they could take, what they could demand, what they could control. I no longer owed them anything. In the weeks that followed, I began rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I started attending a grief support group where I met other parents who understood the unexplainable weight of losing a child. For the first time, I didn't feel so alone. I found comfort in talking about Daniel, in saying his name out loud without worrying that people would roll their eyes or change the subject. Slowly, I started filling my home with things that reminded me of him in ways that didn't hurt as sharply. A framed photo of him laughing at the beach, his artwork preserved in shadow boxes on the wall. I planted a small garden in the backyard, filled with Lila, the flowers he loved so much. Each time they bloomed, I felt like a part of him was still with me. It wasn't healing, not in the sense that people mean when they say, time heals all wounds. A wound like this never fully heals. But I was learning how to live with it, how to carry it without letting it destroy me. And as for my family, I let them go. I stopped answering their calls, stopped reading their messages. The ties had been cut. And though it hurt to admit that the people who raised me could abandon me in my darkest hour, I felt lighter without them dragging me down. Daniel was my family. Daniel was my heart. And though he was gone, I carried him forward in everything I did. The money, the trust fund, the inheritance, it wasn't about dollars and cents. It was about honoring the boy who had loved Legos and Layla, who had laughed louder than anyone, who had told me with his last breath, "It's okay." Mom, for the first time since his death, I believed him. It wasn't okay yet, but it would be. One day,